I feel like men don't get enough appreciation. There's too much vilification of men in society when, let's be honest, if all men disappeared tomorrow, shit would hit the fan. Major. And it's because of men like Sweet Tooth, a little questionable name, just saying. But it's because of men like Sweet Tooth, electricians, people who work in infrastructure, transport, that society functions. And these men are not appreciated.
Do you think if all women disappeared, shit wouldn't hit the fan? You would all thrive?
Well, so society would continue functioning.
Really?
Yes. It would not be good, but like if and we can talk about like hypothetical situations, but if you compare all men disappearing to all women disappearing, within 72 hours, you basically have, it wouldn't be good for if all women disappeared, but like the basic necessities, like to keep society functioning, society would continue functioning.
But
Whereas
society wouldn't exist if women stopped giving birth to
future. If either gender, actually sperm
it would
banks.
last longer. You need both.
Actually, here's the thing though. Those sperm banks, you need power. Here's the thing. Men keep society functioning.
What about when men left and every woman became like Rosie the Riveter? Shit didn't really hit the fan.
Well, there were still men involved in the infrastructure of the country. Not all men were sent off to. I assume you're talking about World War II, where women were involved in the war effort. Mm-hmm. Yes, largely women did. I mean, not all men went off to war, but women did show up for the war effort and took on jobs that would have otherwise been jobs occupied by men.
So doesn't that prove that women can rise to the occasion and do male-dominated jobs if the need arises?
With the appropriate planning and time, but the specific scenario is if all women disappear or all men disappear, you wouldn't have the necessary time to introduce women into these critical fields.
So men are vilified and undervalued because if you gave women 24 hours to resume society after their disappearance, we would need more time? Like, I don't understand your point.
I'm not following the question.
You're saying men are vilified because if they disappeared tomorrow, women couldn't take over.
They're not vilified because of that. I'm saying that there's this sort of underlying thing where it's cool to like shit on men and like hate men, and there's the patriarchy and men are trash, and you hear all this shit from like typically feminists. And I don't think that there's enough appreciation of the hard work that just normal men do to basically keep society functioning.
I agree with that.
I agree.
The infrastructure in this country, in all countries, is created and maintained by men.
Sure, I just don't think feminists undervalue that labor. Like feminists, a lot of them are socialists. They believe in unions. They believe in raising the minimum wage, and that affects these guys who are like electricians and the one doing like the heavy manual labor and keeping society running. Like, I don't think feminists are undervaluing these men. Maybe like a few rad femmes on TikTok saying men, but I don't think that's
it's kind of
feminism.
It's kind of the mainstream like feminist take. There's contempt for men by I would say most feminists.
Okay, I don't think that's true. On social media, everything's polarized for clickbait. Same way I don't think you guys represent the average male view.
Sure. Well, I mean, here's the difference, though. I mean, you're saying it's these radical feminists, but feminism has seeped its claws into pretty much every system and pretty much every realm of human life. The mainstream media. You have academia. Every single university in this country has a feminist study or a woman study or a gender study program, which preaches feminism.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I said radical feminism, like this notion of hate, like male hatred. I don't know if that's sept into every corner of life.
Would you say that one of the core tenets of feminism is the patriarchy theory? That seems, in mainstream feminist academia, they teach patriarchy theory.
Sure. Do you think teaching about like racial oppression is hatred against white people? I guess I'm not saying why doing gender studies.
Focused.
No, I know. I'm saying I don't think teaching
on
gender studies is hatred towards men.
Well, here's how I think it is because if your core message that you're preaching is patriarchy and patriarchy theory, and you're teaching vast swaths of women that men are oppressors and that women are oppressed, then you are essentially teaching women to have contempt for men. Because if you're pitting men and women in this war that, again, if men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed, typically you don't teach someone who is oppressed to have any positive feelings towards the oppressor class. Now, I reject that men as a class are oppressors.
I see it in the language. I always thought this was interesting. It's like, because of feminist movements, we generally don't say even firemen or postmen. It's like fire persons. We don't say stewardess anymore. Like, there's a lot of language policing with respect to that movement. But the movement for equality between the genders is called feminism. And the
Good point.
antagonist towards that process is the patriarchy. I just think that's really interesting.
It should just be egalitarianism, but it's and it's interesting. You make a really good point, because there's this push. Okay, we can't have policemen, firemen anymore. It has to be firefighters. But in the very movement itself, it's gendered. Feminism, the supposed movement for equality, is gendered.
And the main obstacle towards that equality is gendered.
I don't know how we got to that, by the way. What? Why are you staring daggers at me?
That's your smoking gun that the word feminism has femme in it. Like,
It's not my. Well, I mean, it's that's
inherently
one of the.
anti-male. Yeah.
But well, it's more just that's not my biggest grievance with feminism. But it is interesting to me that a lot of feminists push for renaming certain occupations so they're more gender neutral. However, the supposed movement that is at the forefront of fighting for equality continues to call itself feminism, when it should just be egalitarianism.
I guess it's semantics.
I don't think it's semantics, because feminism is an ideology that's basically steeped in man hatred.
I don't know. I don't see it that way, but feminism's super broad. I'm sure there's, like I said, there are a lot of feminists who genuinely
Well,
do
if
hate
if
men.
you step into a feminism 101 class at any university in this country, they're going to teach patriarchy theory, which suggests that women are and were oppressed, and that men are to be blamed for that by virtue of their gender.
Yeah, those classes aren't teaching you to hate the male electrician. They're saying that people who occupy positions of power have tended to.
Can you just
and
tilt your microphone down?
They aren't teaching women to hate like the male electrician or like male homeless people. They're saying patriarchy theories that saying people who hold positions of power have tended to be male, and they continue to tend to be male.
But feminism attacked positions of power, including husbands and fathers, their position of power and authority in the home. So it's attacking everything from the foundation.
Yeah, and
which
it's
is
done
the
a
family.
lot. I think the fact that now, it's considered if it's considered grape if you grape your wife, that's a product of feminism. Would you consider that also being male hatred?
I'm not sure
What was the question?
What's the question?
follow.
That's a feminist thing that happened before. It wasn't considered grape if a man graped his wife. That was just considered like a part of your marriage. So when feminists were the ones who pushed for that, or that's part of feminism, do you consider that hatred of men?
That's
I
actually
see. Well,
true. That came out, and I think in the
patriarch is
60s
against
and
grape.
70s.
You know what I mean?
And I think the argument for that was that there's sort of a lifelong consent when you take
Okay,
the marriage vow.
if one of, just point blank period, if someone is not consenting, like, that's wrong. Point blank period. I don't care if you're married, if one partner is not consenting to sexual activity,
But
then,
they
then
considered
that's,
the consent implied. Like our dialogue of consent is getting pushed by feminists in these so-called man-hating spaces. They
what-
considered the consent assumed.
in feminist spaces, or you mean like
You're
historically?
saying that lack of consent is always bad, but I'm saying
Yes.
they would consider just the fact that you got married,
Well, they're
then
all
the sex is consensual within that institution of marriage. Like the definition of consent changes with the times and the cultural scene.
That's not like the root or the
Is this like a
epitome of
gotcha or
feminism.
something? I mean, like,
How's it a gotcha? I'm saying you were talking about consent, and I was saying they would have probably
well,
said
you
that that's
you
still
brought.
consensual.
I mean, you brought up that question.
What question?
I mean, that's the one example you brought up of in the past, consent was assumed, and look, there were all kinds of shitty ways in which people moved throughout the world historically.
Right, but I'm
There
just
was
saying,
slavery,
when
for example.
feminists were looking out for wives in that instance, you wouldn't consider it that being hatred towards men.
Well, hold on. I mean, I'm not saying that every single thing that feminists have done or have fought for are bad things. I believe in equality between the genders.
I think
But-
this is because feminism has evolved a great deal.
But I mean, if the example you're giving, certainly disavow if one part, regardless of their marital status, if one person is non-consenting, then that's pretty bad.
Right, but even today, feminists will say in the Me Too movement, like, a lot of consent isn't being respected, but then some men will say, oh, they're just man-hating feminists. They want to call us all grapists. So I'm saying it's the same conversation, just in a new era.
Well, I mean, that's one component of feminism.
What
But
was the
I don't see how
original
that's really
question?
related. Yeah, I don't know how that's super related. I mean, I know that, for example, that sort of violence is perhaps something that disproportionately impacts women. So it is gendered to some degree, but I mean, there's all kinds of examples. If we can bring it though back to the patriarchy, I don't know. I don't even really remember where